Let's get this ad page working. Right now, if you click on it, you get 404, and that's because we don't have a route set up for it. So let's open up our index.js inside of our routes folder, and let's just duplicate this route and say add, and we want to have store controller dot add store. Now we'll go over to our store controller file, and we're going to add a new one. So it's going to be exports dot add store equals. We have a request and we have a response. And from that, let's just say res.send, response.send, it works. Let's just double check that that sucker works. And now when you refresh, you should see it works show up. Now we don't actually want to send that. We want to render out one of our templates. So we'll say res.render. And the template that we want to render out, we're going to call it edit store. And the reason I'm not calling this add store is because I want to use the same template whether we're adding a new store or whether we're editing an existing store. That keeps the number of templates down. It keeps our code as dry as possible. What is the data that we need to pass to this? Well, we need to add the title, which is called add store. So now if we save that, we're going to get an error because this doesn't exist, but let's see. There we go. Failed to look up edit store. So we'll go into our views directory here. We'll make a new file and we'll call it edit store.pug. And we'll do exactly what we've been doing for the rest of them. Extends layout, and we'll have our block content, and we'll have a inner div. So this is just my CSS needs a div with the class of inner, so it doesn't go all the way across. We'll have an h2, which will contain the title. Now you could either do this, which is pound curly brackets, and that will put the title into it. Let's see if that works. There we go, add store. And why is that working? Well, because we added the title here called add store. We could add something in there like a emoji poop. There we go. Oh, by the way, don't email me asking how do you do your emojis, Wes? Everybody emails me. Go to wesboss.com/uses. And there's a listing of all of the stuff that I record or everything I use to record, including how do I have such a sweet emoji game. So that is how you add it. The other way that you could do it. So what this does, this interpolation, is you are on page title. That allows us to just interpolate data. You are on page add store. But if you only want to set the content of your h2 tag to be a variable, which is the case here, we don't actually want to add any additional text. You can also do something that looks like this. You can say h2 equals title. And because the title is a variable that's available to us, that's in our locals, it will work just the same. So I'm going to use that. Now we need to add a store form to actually edit our store. And one thing that I like to do with all of my forms is rather than attach the actual form itself to my edit store page, because it's likely that that form to edit a store I want to use throughout the application. And it doesn't make sense to just go ahead and start editing the form right on this page. So what we can do is we can include our store form in a separate file, which we can then pull in and have like sort of a reusable component that we can use over and over again. So the way that I like to do that is with something called a mixin. And a mixin is sort of like a function in JavaScript where you can pass it some data and it's going to return to you some HTML that needs to be displayed onto the page. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to open up our views folder and open up our Mixins folder. There's nothing inside of there right now, but we're going to create our first mixin. So we're going to create a new file here, and we're going to call it, I like to prefix mine with underscore. However, that is 100% not necessary. I just like to do it as a naming convention. We do that in Sass. It's nice to sort of keep that convention going in Pug. So we're going to call it underscore store form capital F dot pug. And we're going to define what the mixin looks like. So the way that you define a mixin is you simply just say mixin and you name the mixin that you want. It's just like a function. So we'll call it store form. And that will take in a store, which is going to be for when we edit it. And it's going to default to an empty object. So for now, we don't actually need the store because we're not editing a store just yet. We're just adding one. But we're going to put that there so that if someone does pass a store, we have the information for how to use it. Otherwise, if someone does not pass a store, this is what this does. It falls back to an empty object. And this is exactly the same in ES6 as well. So you see that Pug has brought a lot of the things over from JavaScript. And from that, you can start to just maybe you put a paragraph, it works. Let's try that. Now, to go back to our edit store, what we need to do is to import the actual mixin that we need. So the way that you import a mixin is you include mixins / and then the name of the mixin store form. And what that will do is it will make all of the mixins that you've defined in this file available to us as functions that live inside of this Pug file. So you can have multiple mixins inside of a file, but I generally keep it one mixin to one file. So we've got mixin store form, and then to use a mixin, you simply use the plus sign. You have the store form. What that will do, the plus will tell Pug that we are using a mixin and we're running the function here. So give that a save now, refresh. You see it works. Why? Because the code that is inside of here will be then used. And you could also pass it some data like store. You could say like the name is Tim Hortons. And in here, you could say it works, and we could interpolate the store.name. So now it should say it works Tim Hortons. There we go. Why? Because we passed in an object, which was a store, and then it accepts an object, which we also call store, and then you can use all the properties on that object that got passed in. It works just like a function in JavaScript. It accepts some parameters, and then we can then use that parameter and all of the properties on it. Now, we're not going to use that just yet, but once we get into editing a store, we will use it. So let's back that up there. Good. Now let's get rid of that paragraph tag and get to editing our form. So the first thing that we need to do is have a form, and the action is going to be /add, and the method is going to be post. I like to capitalize that. And this is a little bit weird, but this is because we're going to be uploading photos. So we're going to say enc type equals multipart /form -data. And then finally, we want to give it a class of card. And that's just so that the CSS that I've written will kick in. Now, inside of that, make sure you see how we're indented one level deep right here. Now we want a label for name, and then you want to input with the type of text, the name of name. So let's see if that's working now. Good. So we have our store form. We have name. This is where we're going to type in the actual name. Now let's go back to our model and just see what other fields that we need, right? So we need the name, and the name of your name. That's a poor naming because now everything is name, but let's look at a different one. Description. Let's do that. So we will have label for description. Description. And then we have an input, type of text, and the name is description. Now, the name that gets posted needs to line up with the name inside of your schema, right? So it's going to be a string. Then we'll go down. We have the description. And then we also wanted to work with some tags, right? There's going to be no input for the slug because that's going to be auto-generated. But we do need to be able to let the person choose from multiple tags. So how would this work? Well, you could pull a list of available tags and have them, or you could have a predefined set of tags. And that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to first have an array of tags, and then we're going to loop over each of them. So we're going to say dash. That means we're running JavaScript because we just need to make a quick variable here before we actually render out any Pug. So the choices is going to be equal to, we're going to have Wi-Fi, open late, family friendly, vegetarian, and licensed. So that's all of our variables that we have here. Then we're going to take those variables and loop over them. So we'll give ourselves an unordered list with the class of tags. And then how do you loop in Pug? Well, you use something called an each. So you say each choice in choices. So that's sort of like a dot for each in JavaScript, but this is the syntax for it. So if choices is our array, choice is going to be each individual one. Then we can go inside of that and just start writing some more Pug. So we're going to say a class of tag and a class of tag choice. I'm using some BEM syntax here so that my CSS kicks in. That's nothing special. This double underscore has nothing to do with Pug. That's just how I like to write my markup. So BEM will kick in. And then for that, we have an input, with the type of checkbox. Let's see how far that gets us. So we should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We should have 5 checkboxes now showing up. There we go. There's 5 empty checkboxes. The ID of that is going to be just choice. So you notice how there's no quotes around that. Why? Because choice is a variable. The value is going to also be choice. The name is going to be tag. So the name there is really important because that will line up to the data being sent to our server. And then below it, we need to have a label, which is for our choice. And inside of that, we can put our choice name. So we can either do the interpolation, which is pound curly brackets and then the variable, or you can use the syntax equals choice. Both of those are going to work here. Let me show you. So you see family friendly, open late, or I could interpolate it with the bang, curly brackets, choice, and that will do exactly the same thing. So we'll leave it at this because we did the other way last time. Okay, good. Now we finally need a input with the type of submit. So input type submit, and the value is going to be save, and give it a class of button just so that the CSS will kick in some nice styles. There we go. We have a save and a name, a description. Now, what happens when I fill this out? Oh, one last thing. I goofed this up. The description is only one line. This description shouldn't be an input. It should be a text area. And there is no type on a text area because it should be multi-line. There we go. This gives us multi-line. So if I have a name like Wes, I have a description, it's good. And then I add a couple tags and click on save. Notice how we're on /add. Click save. What happens? We go back to /add, but we get a 404. And why is that? Well, if you look at a form tag, the form tag always includes 2 important pieces of information about what should happen when somebody clicks on submit for that form. So the action tells the browser where to send the data, and the method tells the browser how to send the data. So the 2 different ones in HTML, there's a couple other ones you can use in JavaScript, but these are two simple ones in HTML are post and get. Post will send the data sort of invisibly, and it'll make it invisible. And that's great for when you don't want the data to show up in the URL. If it's data like a username and a password, you don't want that to show up in the URL. The other one is called get, and that will actually put the data in the URL. And that's helpful for if you want to make a bookmarkable URL. So maybe if I refresh this, actually, if you refresh a page that has been posted to, the browser says, oh, do you actually want to resubmit that form that you just did? And you push continue, you still get a 404 page. If I refresh, see how you can't get back to our form page? That's because we're in a post value right now. But if you actually click on add once more, it will bring us back to that add store URL. But if I say Wes, cool, and then I take like open late, Wi-Fi, and license and save it, you'll see in the URL, because we set it to get, the URL is now showing us the name was Wes, the description was cool, and the tags is Wi-Fi, open late, and licensed. So that's what get does, and that would be great if I was like searching something and I wanted to bookmark it, send it to a friend. But in our case, we don't want that. We want posts. We want all that data to be sent invisibly. So now if let's take that off the URL and submit it, Wes, testing, click a couple, we're going to get a 404. Why is that? Well, if we go back to our routes right here, you'll see that we say router.get add. And that means when you visit a page by default, you're getting that page. But you can also post to a page, and that's generally when a form is submitted or you are posting to that with like a library like jQuery or Axios or whatever library you're using. So what we actually want to do is say router.post /add. So when someone posts to the ad, we want to use store controller, and the method that we're going to create is called create store. So store controller.create store. Now we'll go back to our controller here and we'll add a new one. Exports.create store is equal to request and response. And let's do res.json. Now, how do we get the data? Let's just do this. We submit the form and let's immediately send the data back to the user in JSON. So we'll say res.json. And now if we take request.body, request.body is going to contain all of the information about what got sent to it. Oh, you see this? I forgot an S. So if I fill out this form, Wes, cool, and click a couple tags, click save, click on save. Oh, we actually don't get any data. Request.body should be showing us all of the data that we posted to it. So let's take a look at our form here. And I think what the problem is this enc type multi-part form data. This is a special encoding type that you need when you upload images, and we need to handle that properly when we start uploading images. So we actually don't need this just yet. We're going to come back and modify the form once we start uploading our image and take care of that. So take that out, and let's see if we go back to our form here. Click on add again. Make sure you actually do a page refresh because we want to make sure that that HTML is gone. It's not a cache version. So Wes, cool. Now let's try a couple things. Click save. There we go. Okay, good. So our store controller is now just sending back request.body, and we see this entire object. Alternatively, if you're ever working and you want to see what's being posted, you can just quickly console log request.body. And now when you go back here, you can always hit Command K to just clear out your terminal and give it a refresh. You want to continue. You'll see that you can also console.log all of the data that is being posted. So name, description, and tags, all of the data is now available to us. Okay, cool. But we don't want to, what's the point of just taking the data and sending them back to the person? No, what we actually want to do is to save that data, request.body, back to the database. And in the next video, we're going to look at how do we use Mongoose, which is our library, to interface with MongoDB, as well as a new thing in JavaScript called async await to actually save the data to our database so it persists.